Welcome to this webinar on difficult conversations. I'm Torin.
And I'm Zara. We are two of the core members of the White Noise Collective, an all-volunteer anti-racism grassroots network founded in 2010. Our core members and our in-person work centers in the San Francisco Bay Area, on the ancestral and unceded land of the Ohlone peoples. If you live here in the Bay, we encourage you to learn about and contribute to the Sogoreate Land Trust, led by urban Indigenous women. If you live elsewhere, you can look up and find out whose land you occupy at native-land.ca. As settlers, it is a foundational anti-racist and anti-colonial practice to understand whose land we are on, to learn the histories of this place, which are deeply shaped by genocide and continuous Indigenous resistance and cultural survival, and to act in solidarity with local and national Indigenous movements. The practice of land acknowledgement itself can be a doorway to ongoing, difficult, and necessary conversations to keep making local history personal and attuning to current anti-colonial struggles.
So what are we about? Through our workshops, dialogues, writing, and resources, and in our individuals and organizations, our work within the White Noise Collective aims to investigate patterns common among people at the crossroads of white or white passing privilege and gendered oppression, deepen awareness of dominant images, narratives, and roles that uphold systems of white supremacy and patriarchy, as well as other systems of oppression, such as the virtuous victim or the white savior. Develop skills to show up to social movement work with greater self-awareness, literacy, and accountability.
So before we continue, I'll share a bit about accessibility. In this webinar, we will be speaking verbally and using slides with written text and images to share information. We will speak the majority of the text on each slide, and we will give a general description of relevant images. Also, closed captioning is available. Through both visual and auditory cues, we'll invite you to engage in various awareness and reflection practices to build your own skills and support others in taking action. We encourage you to pause this video at times when we invite you to reflect or to journal. And while it's, of course, very much welcome for you to watch this on your own, it could also be helpful to watch with a partner or small group. We've included one opportunity within the webinar for a partner share, and all of the reflection prompts can be done individually or in pairs or small groups. In our in-person workshops, we draw greatly from small group experiential activities, and we've done our best here in this recorded webinar to draw forth that learning in a way that will hopefully be accessible and inspiring.
This webinar is about having difficult conversations. How are we approaching difficult conversations in our lives around white racism and white supremacy? What frameworks, tools, and interventions can support us to stay grounded in embodied awareness as we connect with friends, family, and others about challenging topics? While we're focused on racism, these tools can, of course, be applied to conversations about other systems of oppression, such as ableism, etc. On this slide is a collage of images of protesters and protest signs from across political and ideological spectrums. We share this image as a way to acknowledge the obvious. We are in a polarized time. It feels like it is getting harder to talk to each other, and yet it's more important than ever that we do. If we are going to move towards collective liberation, we need to be building relationships and building our movements, which requires many approaches. And Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or BIPOC, are calling on white people to stretch and be brave in this way.
On this slide is an educational graphic called the Pyramid of White Supremacy, which shows a triangle bisected with a line, horizontal line towards the top. Above the line are examples of overt forms of white supremacy largely agreed to be socially unacceptable, such as the Ku Klux Klan or racist slurs. And below the line, the vast majority of the pyramid lists covert forms of white supremacy, such as inequitable healthcare, mass incarceration, racist mascots, white silence, housing discrimination, spiritual bypassing. When we say white supremacy, we are using this to express that we are not referring exclusively to the far right and to the overt bigotry of the type pointed to in the top of this teaching tool graphic. Rather, we're talking about the entire violent system as it pervades societal institutions across the political spectrum. Media narratives, as well as representation, interpersonal interactions, and assumptions.
White Noise Collective has been hosting workshops for many years now with a focus on difficult conversations, sharing and evolving key practices and insights over time from those who have attended. Our workshops have been historically offered directly through White Noise Collective and also through Surge Bay Area, with a focus on helping white people have brave and difficult conversations with other white people. While we are addressing this to a white and white passing audience, we do not limit our participants in any way, and we trust BIPOC to self-determine if you wish to watch and how to draw from the offering in a way that is useful to you. And whoever you are, we always welcome your feedback.
Okay, so let's dive in with a first reflection prompt. What difficult conversations do you find yourself in around racism, racial justice, and white supremacy? Take a moment to think of an example that is alive for you. We ask this question at the start of our workshops as a way to appreciate both the range of what people are grappling with and to reinforce that we are not alone in these struggles. It will also be helpful to have one or two particularly vivid examples in mind as we work through different activities. If you need a moment to think of one, feel free to pause the video here. We know that there is such a great span of relationships, situations, and responses to current events in which we're trying to have difficult conversations. And so here are a few examples of what we've heard in our workshops. Talking to someone who decides to call the police, how to respond to inflammatory social media posts about protests, justifying the actions of protesters or rioters, fear of disrupting the peace with family and friends, how racial justice connects to my and my coworker's job, calling people in, generational differences, coming to grips with great privilege, the long struggle of unlearning white supremacy, abolition and reparations, how to prevent shame shutdown, and keep white folks engaged in the conversation without rescuing them from the discomfort. And before we get into various approaches and strategies, we also want to take a moment to acknowledge, as a type of skill in itself, recognition of the very real internal barriers and defeating voices that can add an extra layer of challenge to this work. Pictured here is a poster from one of our past in-person offerings of this workshop. Again, we share these past responses, as we will continue to throughout this webinar, in the spirit of collective wisdom and surfacing common patterns, and as a way of creating connection to others who are doing this work across time and space, even as you may be watching this on your own. And so in response to the question, what are your internalized defeating voices? This poster reads, futility, be quiet, don't make waves, I won't be liked, they'll think I'm attacking them as a person, they've already put me in a box, hard to keep all the facts straight, don't make a mistake, do it right, disagreement damages the relationship, not ready to respond quickly enough to a shocking statement, you need to be a good listener, I get emotional and lose purpose. I won't remember the facts perfectly, talking over others' heads. I'm not educated enough. Privilege is ignorance, and no one cares. Please pause here and notice what may resonate and think about what are some of your own internalized defeating voices. Where do they come from? What do they say? How and when do they say these messages? And what are the effects? This work is not about trying to negate or overpower these beliefs in our consciousness. Sometimes the first conversation we have to have is with ourselves to identify what support we need, to offer empathy for the harms we have felt, to figure out how we move forward, to speak up and courageously experiment despite and alongside these voices.
And just to help put this work in perspective, we wanted to share this centering quote from Audre Lorde. It says, "I have found that battling despair does not mean closing my eyes to the enormity of the tasks of effecting change, nor ignoring the strength and the barbarity of the forces aligned against us. It means teaching, surviving, and fighting with the most important resource I have, myself, and taking joy in that battle. It means for me recognizing the enemy outside and the enemy within, and knowing that my work is part of our power, and knowing that this work did not begin with my birth, nor will it end with my death. And it means knowing that within this continuum, my life and my love and my work has particular power and meaning relative to others."
We're going to talk briefly now about the core principles that we're presenting in this webinar, which one of our past participants aptly named the guiding stars. This workshop is not about reviewing and drilling talking points, which can be super useful in some outreach and canvassing contexts, for example. Nor is it looking for the one singular perfect intervention, the right thing to say at all times in all places. Instead, our emphasis is on cultivating multiple dimensions of skill and capacity, trying things out, doing things differently, and staying present with the process. And so these guiding stars are what can support us in that. The first is that having difficult conversations is based on connection to yourself and the other person. Awareness of physical sensations and emotions, curiosity about the other person's beliefs, and active, deep listening are key tools for connection. For this reason, we have integrated some grounding techniques. We believe in the transformative power of practice over time to build these muscles of attention in ourselves, to create unanticipated ripple effects, and to build stronger relationships. And the last guiding star is that different people require different approaches to hard conversations. And the spectrum of allies model we'll share can help frame your starting point as you strategize about particular conversations.
All right, we're going to move now into talking about grounding and staying present and why it's helpful in maintaining connection. While grounding is often conflated with calming or with not feeling difficult or activating feelings, our focus here is on two aspects of grounding. First, noticing and staying present with whatever is arising in us. Then, using that information to identify when our systems are experiencing stress in order to know if it would be helpful to calm or regulate. So we'll move into a guided grounding practice, inviting breath and movement, focused on intentionally bringing up challenging thoughts related to difficult conversations in our lives. We'll follow that with a little bit of movement, which can be done in whatever way works for your body. And then we'll end with another grounding. So remember, as we go through these activities, that everything is optional. And also remember that, many of us and our loved ones are under a lot of pressure right now. So we invite you, as part of the work of engaging in difficult conversations, to notice your own patterns of arousal even during this webinar, and notice if you need to pause, and let yourself do that. So you're welcome to get comfortable in whatever position you're in, whether that is sitting, standing, or laying down. Close your eyes if that works for you, or simply look away from the screen. Relax your eyelids, soften your gaze. To start with, I invite you to notice your thoughts. Just notice them without trying to change them. Are you thinking about something in this moment, or maybe something in the past or the future? Next, bring your awareness to your body, to any tightness, any noticeable sensations, to the support of the ground or the seat beneath you. As you take in your next breath, try to feel that breath moving all the way out to your fingertips and your toes and the top of your head. Next, from this place of feeling present and aware of your physical experience, let yourself start to think about a difficult conversation that you are in with someone, or one that you want to have. Take a moment to notice what is happening in your body now. How is your heart rate? Has anything changed? What does your skin feel like? The back of your neck, areas where you usually hold tension, just bringing awareness. Now start your body move. Perhaps just start by lightly swaying side to side, letting your head and arms move around, and see what emerges. As you continue, feel into a gesture, sound, or motion that relates to this difficult conversation. It could be anything. There's no right, wrong movement. So just take a moment to notice again what is happening in your body. How does your body want to express whatever is coming up? Feel into this. Remember it. Remember how it feels to hold this shape, whatever it is, or to make that sound. And now let yourself just gently shake your body a bit. Release your hands, your head. Let them move around in a way that feels more spacious in your body. Feel yourself letting go of the previous moment and start to return your attention to the space around you. If your eyes are closed, slowly open them, letting in the light, taking a breath. Now notice the space around you. What colors do you see? When you're ready, bring your attention back to the screen, letting your eyes start to focus on the green grass and the text. If we were together in a workshop space, this is when we would invite you, if you wanted, to share your gesture, sound, or your motion with others in order to create an art gallery of sorts and to see in real space the common patterns we feel in our bodies around difficult conversations. Now, please pause this video and take a moment to either write down or share with your partner a word or phrase that came up for you in this exercise, and any other reflection you want to capture related to your gesture, sound, or motion, and what came up for you in this experience. When you're ready, you can restart the video. So we're going to talk now about activation and what happens in our body when we feel stress. So how do you know when you are activated or stressed? What are the signs or sensations? Over the years in our workshops, we've asked this question and shared responses for group reflection in order to surface valuable knowledge and common patterns of arousal. So here are some responses we've received in our workshops. Clenching in jaw, my brain sort of freezes. I can't think of anything to say. Hard to take deep breaths. Feel shaky. My stomach starts turning. I heat up and speed up. Heart racing, sense of urgency, difficulty listening. Shallow breathing. I feel a tightness in my chest and throat. Quicker, shallow breath, hot face. Muscles tighten and my breath is halted. Tense and buzzing. I find myself freezing for words and repeating myself. Perhaps some of these feel familiar, and you're not alone if that's true. This is why we ground. In so many ways, this work is physiological. There's a layer of words that are being said in a conversation, but there's an entire landscape of experience happening in our bodies at the same time. It's actually a lot of information to integrate while also trying to stay present in a conversation. But these sensations, like your breath and heart rate, or your thought patterns, or if you're spacing out, they can all be signals to help you notice how you're doing and if you're getting overactivated, and therefore might need some support in getting your body related. So when we feel threatened, our bodies tend to react in habitual patterns before our minds have comprehended what's happening. Research has shown that these defensive responses can be triggered whether it is our values or our physical selves that feel threatened. Some of the common patterns, which you've perhaps heard before, include fight, flight, freeze, and appease. We're not going to dive deeply into these processes here, but we've included a few links in the resource list if you'd like to learn more about it. And while all people and all living creatures have some form of these defensive response mechanisms, given that we live in a society that is built on white supremacy and patriarchy, there are also additional traumas that we might experience because of our skin color, gender identity or presentation, class, disability, etc., might heighten our nervous system responses. So there's also valuable information that we've developed about the overlap and similarity between these trauma responses and common expressions of white fragility, a term named and popularized by Robin DiAngelo, which can arise when we ourselves are the one being brought into a difficult conversation. So white fragility is a state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress can feel like an attack and becomes intolerable, given that white people, particularly in North America, live in a racially insulated social environment that does not build capacity and stamina to stay present in racially charged or complex conversations. And there are three main types of defensive reactions common within white fragility: arguing, avoidance, and checking out, which map onto and can look a lot like the trauma responses we just named. So on this slide is a table that lists fight, flight, and freeze reactions in one column, and then the associated emotional and behavioral manifestations and patterns of white fragility in the next two columns. For fight, examples of emotional and behavioral manifestations include irritability and loss of temper, while common patterns of white fragility might include argumentation and anger. Within the category of flight, avoidance and anxiety show up as both trauma responses and white fragility. And under the umbrella of freeze, a common trauma response is numbing and a common white fragility response is spacing out. We'll include some links in the resource section if you'd like to learn more about this phenomenon. The point here is not to get too much into our heads with all of this information, but really just to contextualize the full range of sensations that might be coming up for us and for others as we approach difficult conversations. All of this is powerful to be able to recognize in ourselves and others, to notice as a means of building commitment and stamina, to stay present with tension, name what is arising, and expand the range of choice. And of course, to keep our critical humility alive. So just to give all of this a chance to integrate, we invite you to pause this video and take some time to reflect by either writing down or sharing with your partner. What was a time when someone attempted to engage you in a difficult conversation about race? What did that bring up for you? Do you recall what may have been your defensive reactions? What insights do you have about how defensiveness tends to function in you? When you're ready, restart the video. The ways we respond are not bad or wrong. It's just that when we come into a difficult conversation from a place of ungroundedness or feeling triggered, we tend to be more reactive. Grounding skills can help bring us into the present moment and into greater awareness of our patterns as they show up in our thoughts and our body sensations. This gives us choice and allows for change and flexibility. It's harder to change something if you don't know it's there. When our ability to think, listen, or find words is diminished, it's just naturally less likely we'll show up in a way that feels good to ourselves and others. Instead, our goal is to do the work in a way that builds connection, joy, and resilience, and to learn to have greater tolerance and awareness to stay present, even when stressful sensations arise. Can we learn to be in disagreement, but to encourage each other to want to stay in the difficult work of connecting? In Medicine Stories, Aurora Levins Morales says, "It is part of our task as revolutionary people who want deep-rooted radical change, to be as whole as it is possible for us to be. As we become more grounded and embodied and support the same in others, we can make the work more sustainable so that we can continue to show up." While we're practicing just a few grounding skills in this webinar, such as intentional breathing, focusing on shapes and colors around you, you can find a link in the resources which lists many more grounding skills. We encourage you to learn about and try some of these before you're in a difficult conversation so that you have them available to you in those difficult moments.
As we said, the power of ongoing practice is a guiding star in this work. Let's get into it. What are we practicing? Ngethe Maina and Stacey Haynes of Generative Somatics, in their essay called The Transformative Power of Practice, remind us that practice is simply the act of doing something, whether that something is as complicated as doing a piano solo or as simple as washing the dishes. We call it practice when the act becomes a repeated behavior. And the more we practice something, the better we get at it. Our experience, of course, teaches us that sometimes we practice and we don't seem to get better, but in fact, we are getting better. We may just not be getting better at what we want, right? We're always strengthening something. And so this is really a forever question. What are we strengthening through repetition? And we can reflect on the many levels of practice present in difficult conversations about racism and white supremacy. What are we strengthening? Courage, self-righteousness, grounding, shame, othering, connection. And they remind us that practice is continually shaping us, whether that is opening us up to new ways of being or increasingly calcifying the way we think, act, and feel. And so a valuable distinction is between default practices and intentional practices. Default practices are deeply rooted, automatic, and unconscious. We can get to know them, become aware of them, even befriend them as we cultivate new practices. So awareness of highly repeated default practices can support us in outgrowing those that no longer serve us or our anti-racism work. Intentional practices, in contrast, are those that we choose to do and repeat in order to transform the way we show up in the world. So a question for reflection is, what are your default practices and what are your intentional practices in the context of difficult conversations? Right? What are we practicing at any given moment? Curiosity or predetermined judgment? Listening to explore and understand, or listening to persuade and make your point? Pushing your edges into discomfort or avoiding what is difficult? These are all questions to keep close and notice. And so a number of levels of practice that we want to offer to strengthen our capacity, our skill, and our presence are, to begin with the first, is to talk plainly and lose jargon. Jargon can be alienating and can reinforce an insular activist environment, communicating that if you don't know these terms, concepts, or acronyms, you don't get it. How can we convey what matters in a way that others can plainly understand who may not have the same references? And if we lose reliance on shared jargon, how may that in fact deepen our own understandings and ability to communicate? The next ongoing practice, which can look a million different ways, is to bring it home. Why does this matter to you? What do you care about? How did you come to understand this justice issue more deeply? What do you perceive from your vantage point and social location? And what is your stake in social change? We can tell humanizing stories that personalize the political to center who has been impacted, name how we have been impacted, and invite our dialogue partner to reflect on their particular worldview and to question what life experiences and media narratives have shaped it. How do we know what we know? The next practice is to ask open-ended, non-defensive questions. So for example, what do you mean by that? Or could you clarify? This gives time and space for us to keep our assumptions in check and for the people we are talking with to consider what they have said. This can be a gift, the gift of listening louder, so to speak, and thinking twice. Why did I say that? Is that really what I believe? Where did that narrative come from? Who taught me that? This allows everyone to reconnect with shared understanding instead of sliding into a cascade of assumptions and projections. Give the benefit of the doubt. Ask for clarification before assuming immediately the person you are talking with has one specific opinion in opposition to yours. Next, explore tensions and complexities with curiosity. This practice helps us to move beyond flattening binaries, the ways that we may be engaged in mutual superficial caricatures. The spirit of exploration and curiosity can intervene into a story in our heads that may go something like, because you hold this stance on one issue, I'm going to assume I know what all of your stances are. Another practice is to notice and utilize body language to create conditions for more openness. Endless opportunities to practice. Are we somehow shielding ourselves, such as with arms crossed or our chest puffed out? What happens when we take a moment to shift our posture? Remember to breathe more deeply, turn towards our partner in a way that communicates genuine openness and a desire to connect more deeply, and non-verbally invites them to do the same. And one other practice that we want to offer is awareness of patterns of shame and feelings of some version of not enoughness. This is critical to make conscious of when might our own judgment of another person be related to our own lack of self-acceptance. How might we at times be projecting our sense of not enoughness onto others in these difficult conversations? And difficult conversations are as much, if not more, about listening as they are about talking and expression. Active listening can support conditions for rehumanization of each other and moving through stuckness. Some dimensions of active listening are listening to understand instead of listening to persuade. Can we listen so well that we could accurately reflect back what someone has said or explain it clearly to someone else, even if we disagree with the beliefs they hold? Listening to understand means we are not waiting while someone is talking to make our point or rehearsing it. We are turning our attention to the task of understanding. Listening to understand as a practice also does not mean that we necessarily agree with what they are saying. It invites others to engage with respect. Active listening involves holding a sense of openness, of questioning what we do not know, and creating an environment of being open to learning and to learning together with our dialogue partner. Even when we are activated, we can return to staying open to learning and questioning what we don't know and where our knowledge comes from, again, inviting our partner to do the same. We can propose doing homework on an issue before talking again. Empathy, humility, and curiosity are all allies in this process. Active listening supports us to notice assumptions and to listen to ourselves. Right? When we are stressed, we often speed up and heat up. Dialogue can be a practice of slowing down so that everyone can not only listen for deeper understandings of others, but can decelerate to observe our own mental patterns, what is arising, our habits. And this process continues often after we have parted from the conversation. Where did that belief come from? What surprised me? What deeper truth or insight is now surfacing? Active listening is to not only the content of what is said, but how it is said. And this is vital. Paying attention to emotional tone and body language. We can reflect back to our dialogue partner what we heard was most alive for them. And so reflecting on all of these practices that we've just shared, which ones feel like strengths that you possess and which feel like growing edges? Which of these are familiar and what might you be curious to try out? And let's remember this quote from Terry Kelleher saying, absolve yourself of the responsibility of changing someone else's mind. They will change their own mind. You cannot always know the impact of a conversation. Acknowledge there are certain people who may never change. Notice how to strategically engage with people who may be swayed in relation to those that will likely not. And we share this in the spirit of saying that, even if a conversation goes poorly or seems to, we are always still strengthening these skills and strengthening parts of ourselves. Plus, we often don't know what seeds we may have planted. And so while we've focused in this webinar on these specific practices so far, you'll find a longer list in the resources section. And it is incredibly valuable, as was said before, but to say it again, to play with different practices in lower stakes, relatively easeful situations, which aids us in higher stakes, challenging conversations. So let's move into reflection and integrate. The reality is we don't often get positive role modeling for how to change our minds. And it is not often or ever the case that after a single conversation with someone, they say, wow, thank you. That made me completely rethink my white supremacist colonial patriarchal worldview. So to practice building empathy and critical humility, let's think about a time we changed our minds. And so the reflection question is to think about a time when you yourself questioned or changed your beliefs about something. What contributed to that shift? What made you feel inspired, supported, or brave enough to examine a deeply held belief or worldview? How does this impact the way you might support others in this process in service of racial justice? So let's pause and take some time to write or reflect on this. And so now we can move into practicing deep active listening and shift from a personal reflection to practice. So as we've just named, difficult conversations are just as much about staying present in our listening as it is about what we say and how we say it. If you're watching this with a friend, we encourage you to pause the video and try out this next exercise together. If you're watching alone, perhaps find a friend to practice with at another time. You will each take turns being the speaker and listener. The goal here will be to practice active listening, both centering in yourself and understanding where the other person is coming from. Get curious about what they are saying so that you can respond in a way that lets them know they are being heard. Knowing that someone is truly listening can lower defenses and defensiveness. So building on the earlier prompt, choose one person to start as the listener and one person to start as the speaker. And you can give about 5 minutes to each person. A few minutes for sharing in response to the prompt, and then a minute for the listener to reflect back, and then switch. So for the person who is the speaker, share about a time when you changed your beliefs about something. What contributed to that shift? What made you feel inspired or curious enough to question a deeply held belief or value? What supported you to move from a neutral or passive place into a more active place? And we want to ask you just to be aware of who is holding space for you and how your story might impact them. So please consider a story that is a level intensity on a scale. If 1 is very low and 10 very high, it's something like a 4 or less. So for the person who's practicing listening, in your role, quiet your own mind and focus on what you are hearing. Notice what is most alive in your partner as they share. Notice themes. Notice their body language and their tone. Also notice your own body's response to your partner's share. When they are done, reflect back briefly what you heard and noticed from them, not how you felt about it. So for instance, something like, I really felt you come alive when you shared about this breakthrough moment of connection. Or I noticed your face light up or shift when you remembered how a certain experience felt. And then you can switch. So times when we have done this activity and versions of it in person, we asked people to then reflect out on what it was like to listen and be listened to in this way. Here are a few responses we've heard from past workshop participants. It was good to be heard and respected for my journey. I was able to meet them where they are, create safety and connection, away from shame and facts, and then invite them into learning and action and share about my own experiences. It was great to be listened to in a way that wasn't about what I said, but how I show up. feeling seen and having positive intentions affirmed. Keeping an open mind and open heart requires humility. Really helpful to reflect, share, be heard in this way. Prioritize listening and connection seems to move the energy of attachment to outcome in the conversation and can create an openness. Listening with curiosity versus listening to undermine or win the argument. So author and activist Adrienne Marie Brown says, what we give attention to grows. What we pay attention to grows. I practice what I want to become. We practice what we want to create.
Our next section is about contextual strategy. So just letting everything that has been presented so far just sink into your body, continue absorbing it as we move into this next section. Again, pause, take breaks when you need to. We're going to talk now about how to think in a more strategic way. So in most social change situations, there's a struggle between those who want a certain change and those who don't. We humans believe a lot of different things, and sometimes the distance between us can feel insurmountable. And we need to be able to stretch across spaces and talk to people that think and believe differently. And this requires both being present and listening and actually listening to the other person in order to understand their values and staying aware of ourselves and our values. So on this screen is a half circle divided into 5 pie slices. On each pie slice is a label. From right to left, they read active opposition, passive opposition, neutral, passive allies, and active allies. There are also arrows that demonstrate movement left from one pie slice to the next. This is the spectrum of allies model from Training for Change and more originally attributable to David Albert, which can be helpful in thinking through how to approach a conversation and keeping our goals realistic. So an active opponent may be the difficult conversation most on your mind, and this is not to dissuade you from those conversations, because maybe you really can convince your right-wing uncle to join you in boycotting Amazon or Sabra hummus or in fighting to abolish prisons during the course of one Zoom call. Maybe. I want to believe that is possible. But social movement theory actually says the most important conversations are those that move every slice over one. And history has shown that it is not necessary to win every opponent to your point of view. To win campaigns, it is only necessary to move some or all of the pie wedges one step in your direction. So again, we're not trying to tell you not to have high hopes and expectations, but simply inviting you to think strategically as you have conversations, just as you would if you were planning another type of direct action. So next, we'll share a few specific strategy ideas to consider with folks in each slice of the pie. So active and passive opposition. What do we mean by this? Active opponents are people who have beliefs that are diametrically opposed to yours and who are actively trying to make change in the world in alignment with those beliefs. Passive opponents also have vastly different beliefs from you, but for some reason are not putting those beliefs into action. For both of these groups, strategic intervention includes plant seeds, inspire doubt, surface dissonance between their beliefs and their values and actual needs. Stay focused on the issue, not the person. Offer compassion without enabling their beliefs. You can connect with someone around shared struggles of navigating this world without saying you agree with the meaning they are making of it. Share your process of learning to change your beliefs and what the seed was for you, especially if you used to share their beliefs. And find allies to build a campaign of conversations. Who else can be working alongside of you to be planting these seeds? Next is our neutral category. These are people that haven't taken a stand one way or the other. Maybe they don't even know what they believe. For them, here are a few options. Empathize. The world is confusing. We get mixed messages from the media. Sometimes it can be hard to know what or whom to believe. That's real. Educate about the issues, or better yet, invite them to learn about something together with you. In a role play in one of our past workshops, one of our participants invited someone to research together about the defund police movement in order to understand it better. And inspire hope that change is possible. Share your own hope and why you do the work you do. And motivate and agitate. This is a dire time. We need to do something. Passive allies. So these are people who agree with you, but who aren't taking action. Strategies for them include help them connect their actions to their values. Again, motivate and agitate. This is a dire time, right? It's really important that we're taking action in line with our values. Help them overcome the fear of taking action, or maybe even better, invite them into action with you. And remember that action can look a lot of different ways. Perhaps this means inviting them to join you at a protest or an event, right? Mainstream media portrays protests as really scary and dangerous. So your invitation could be the bridge they need to overcome that perception. Or maybe it looks like helping them find a way to plug in that is more accessible for them, such as joining a mutual aid project, making calls to a local politician to support getting legislation passed, sending postcards to political prisoners, or helping them connect to an organization or fundraiser they might not have known about. And inspire hope that change is possible and that taking action can make a difference. Sometimes we all have moments where we slide back into this passive place because we feel despair or hopelessness. And we need the support of those around us to counter the belief that's encouraged by those in power that it's all pointless and nothing we do matters, right? It's essential to learn about and share examples of social change from history within your own local community so that you have that to support yourself and your passive allies. And share your own story. What supported you to move from a passive place into a more active place? And what keeps you going? And active allies. These are your fellow activists who are taking large and small actions in a variety of ways. All right. And with them, there are still difficult conversations we sometimes have to have. And so, what can we do to find ways to support and nurture each other and deepen connection? Check in on each other, offer to show up at each other's next event, lift up each other's work. Whether someone is brand new to the movement or a lifelong activist, we all need to be encouraged and empowered at times and to feel a sense of belonging and purpose. Build alignment and shared analysis. We all come to this work with different experiences and perspectives, and we all have our different learning and growing edges and areas where we might disagree. So difficult conversations and deep generative dialogue are skills we have to practice even with our closest. Let's keep tending and sharpening our goals, our visions, our language, and our strategies. Practice transformative justice and accountability. Even when we share vision, we are bound to still have conflict. So let's learn and practice new ways to hold each other when harms are done or mistakes are made that align with our visions of a more just and liberated future and that don't replicate the same oppressive structures we're trying to dismantle. Let's do our best to keep each other in the movement, even when it's hard or when interpersonal challenges or ruptures surface. For everyone, find enough common ground for a real conversation, right? Identify shared values and beliefs, build relationship and trust. Adrienne Maree Brown puts this well when she says that we need to move at the speed of trust. Understand the stories, assumptions, and values that lead to their position. If you don't know what to say, acknowledge it. Go do your homework and then come back to them later. Don't feel like you need to have all the answers in that moment. And also always think about who else is listening to the conversation. Perhaps you don't sway Aunt Betty, but perhaps others around you are also listening. Again, you can think of a difficult conversation as a type of direct action. The most effective actions take place within campaigns, and campaigns take place within social movements. A social movement is made up of different groups, networks, and individuals moving together towards systemic goals. Social movements are powerful because their impact is greater than the sum of their parts. Now, we're not going into a whole training here on direct action strategy, but it can be really exciting to think through the conversations can fit into those larger frameworks of campaign strategy. And there are great resources available if you'd like to learn more. We've included the Ruckus Society, which is now part of the Blackout Collective's Action Handbook in the resource section. The bottom line is that we always have to remember that each conversation is one part of a bigger whole. If an action is isolated, it's not as powerful. But if your actions continue over time and synergize and align with others, it can create exponential change. Reminding ourselves of this can help offset the despair and disappointment that can come with a conversation not going the way we would have liked. All right, so take a breath, let all of that information settle in, and now let's move into a reflection. Take a moment to think about an issue that is important to you and why you want to talk to others about it. Why do you believe what you do about this? Now think about who might be in different pieces of the pie on this issue. Who in your family or community might be inclined to be most supportive, least supportive? Who's in the middle? Or think about one person. Where are they on this spectrum? What do you think has led them to believe what they believe? What might some of their assumptions, worldview, and values be? Now take a few minutes to think about this, or even write or map it out into the spectrum. You can journal and you can pause this video and restart when you're ready.
All right, so we're going to move now into closing and commitments. Continuing to breathe is good. And so thank you for hanging with us through this. We hope this is valuable for your ongoing work. And a summary review of what we have looked at in this time of key takeaways and guiding stars are embodied awareness and grounding, which includes noticing signs and sensations of activation, fragility, and defensiveness. This is about strengthening our capacity and sensitivity to stay present, especially when it's hard. The transformative power of practice, where we can notice default and intentional practices and strengthen intentional ones. Some of the practices we offered are talking plainly, bring it home, non-defensive questions, exploring tensions with curiosity, awareness of body language, and awareness of feelings of shame and not enoughness. Active listening, which has many dimensions, listening to understand, noticing our assumptions, cultivating openness, empathy, and curiosity, and to think strategically about each conversation, using the spectrum of allies framework, a contextual approach to conversations, and the reminder and knowing that each conversation is one part of a bigger whole in movement in service of racial justice.
So now it's time to think of a commitment. What thing you want to commit to practicing? It could be one practice that you want to cultivate over time, one strategy you want to try, or perhaps it's to find an accountability buddy for support, someone who shares your values, with whom you can role play, practice interventions, prepare and ground, and then debrief after you try out having a difficult conversation with someone.
And for the final reflection prompt, questions we'd like to pose are: what keeps you grounded? What inspires you to keep showing up? Here are some responses that we've heard over the years. Remembering my friends who need me to show up. Connection and shared vulnerability. Deep connections, even though it is hard. My internal moral compass. Relationships. Knowing that it's always possible to keep growing and learning. Wanting to get rid of collective pain and oppression. Big change comes from lots of small change. Grief. The people I love. Communities of accountability. And desire for authentic connections. What is it for you? So you can take a moment to let your attention come back inwardly, to breathe, to feel your body and the space that surrounds you, and to just sense how this entire experience is settling into your system. Lastly, we would like to offer gratitude and acknowledgement for all of the individuals, organizations, and resources that made this webinar possible.
All right. Thank you so much for taking this time to learn and deepen with us. Again, check out the resources linked below and check out even more resources on our website at conspireforchange.org, where you can also sign up for our mailing list and find out more about us and how to get involved in our work.